Hi, Henk Akmans here, Supply Chain Dynamics, Chapter 10, Travail, Transparency and Trust, and Sysdea Gameplay 5, the base case behavior, or normal behavior you would say. What typically happens when two parties collaborate? Well, let's organize the screen a little bit. Let's add a chart around here to trust a little bigger, and let's combine trust from A to B and trust from B to A here. What you see here is what typically happens. We can even make it a more atypical thing. In the atypical case, there is no change in demand initially. It's perfectly stable. And then this is what really happens. So when two parties really, initially kind of on a scale of 1 to 10, trust each other on the level of 7, and they start collaborating, then things will work really well, nice. This is actually the non-typical, non-base case, because this rarely happens. What happens much more often is indeed that this demand step, so a change in the demand for the products that B is selling, leads to also a change in the demand for the products A that B orders with A. And then you see a dip in trust on both sides, kind of deeper with the supplier, because the supplier gets an unpleasant surprise. We can sort of follow that throughout the system. When you start off all the way up here with the customer B order fulfillment flow, then you see that here is an increase. That then leads to a need for more supplies. That goes into here. The supplies, there is a desired increase in the production start for B as a result of this. As a result of this, you also need more A. There's a little overshoot here because you do get some supplies, and we'll have a look at it a bit more. As a result of that, the forecast communicated to A, well, that starts to be a bit more volatile. But you see that initially goes up and then it really goes down. There is a little bit of opportunism around here. The actual order rate also fluctuates, and the response from B to this is also that B gets more to ship to A. As a result of which A's stock declines of finished products, so A has to produce more and also starts to produce more, but that also leads to a perceived, some unreliability of perceived unreliability of B in the eyes of A. Again, B can't really help the initial increase. It simply happens to their demand, but A doesn't know if it's gaming or the real case, and so A does respond a little bit untrustworthy, which B may or may not pick up, and that's sort of the dynamic that occurs. So this is the base case. Notice that if you make some changes to this, already there are differences. For instance, if we make the initial trust of A in B a bit lower, then you see they start lower, but there's also more fluctuation happening there. So when one of the two parties doesn't really trust the other side, there are quite some problems around here. The same is true, of course, on the other side, but please notice that even if the situation is perfectly stable, so we have no change of demand at all, then this can still lead to this kind of fluctuation. So we have no increase, sorry, let's make sure that we have no increase up here. We have no increase of demand, and we have initial trust of 0.5. That really looks kind of nice. And an initial trust of 0.5 of B also. Yeah, that's what I wanted to illustrate. So if both sides really trust each other well, and there's no demand change at all, still you have these fluctuations. So there's no external driver at all. It's perfectly stable demand, but because the other side doesn't really trust the other side, they start inflating each other, their response to the other side, and that does lead to this kind of fluctuation. And that's also, I suppose, a base case behavior, that if two parties don't trust each other so much, they get what they expect that they will be getting. There are quite some proverbs and sayings around this. Let's move back to the situation where parties sawed off trust each other initially. I keep forgetting that I should be doing that then like this. And it's all pretty stable, and let's then make the demand step slider back to this case, put 0.2. So here you have the little dip. If we make the demand step size, like say 25, you do get much more volatile demand. So here we have initially fairly trusting partners, but when the change in demand becomes higher than a certain threshold level, the relationship remains problematic over at least 200 periods. Perhaps that in the end this still will go right. We could run the simulation a bit longer, and perhaps it won't. But you do reach, after a certain step input to the system, a certain bang to the system, certain test input, you could say a disturbance to the system, you do get pretty unstable behavior for a long time. And in fact, after 200 periods, the supplier still doesn't trust the customer. And don't forget, this all began with, well, something that the customer really couldn't do anything about.